Let's raise our hands. Almighty Heavenly Father, Yahweh, this is Cohen Michael Hawkins, asking to come before you, being seed of your last day's witness, Yisrayl Hawkins, and through your Son, Yeshua, Messiah, the High Priest of your house, Father. Thanking you for your great blessings of giving us the understanding and the wisdom that you have in these last days, Father, to rehearse the words of beloved overseer that you have given into us, Father. We thank you for this opportunity. We ask and pray you continue to open our minds and help us to receive these things and to grab hold of them, Father, and to remember the things that we've been taught so we may never be deceived and may overcome, Father, all things. We bless you. We thank you, Father, and we do ask and pray these things through the authority of your great priest, through your servant Israel, and through your beloved Son, Yeshua, Messiah. Hallelujah, Yahweh. Praise Yahweh. Please be seated, men. See, we left off on page 318, right? Let's see. 318. Let's go to the top of the page here. Now, this is talking about Yekeskia, about the vision that he had seen of the temple in these last days. And it says, Yekeskia saw the Temple Mount in our day, when another building would be sitting on the south of where the temple of Yahweh once stood. Okay, so we see the city building here. And if you notice here in Yekeskia 40 verse 2, it says in the... Now, remember now, this shows the power of Yahweh, because it's not like Yekeskia was, transported into the future time, into our day. But Yahweh revealed to him what would take place. And it was shown, but it wasn't like it was like his time travel and stuff. Unless Yahweh reveals that that's what he did with the prophets when they saw things, but I don't think so. He was able to open up their mind to see these things, just like he opens our minds to be able to look back into the past and to understand what the prophets have written. So it was that he was able to allow them to see these things and to show them the things that would come to pass here. So in Isaiah 40 verse 2 it says, in the visions of Yahweh, okay, he brought me into the land of Israel and set me upon the great exalted mountain. Now remember, the great exalted mountain, at the time of Yekeskia, this was Jerusalem, okay, and this was what was known as Mount Zion, where the temple stood, okay, and at one time, remember, it was acceptable to Yahweh as he had that temple built so that in the time to come, Yeshua could come, and of course everything would take place to where the violent man would take over and they would end up putting him to death. Because otherwise, you see, if the temple hadn't been corrupted and the priests hadn't have all been corrupted and turned that way, then they would have never put Yeshua to death. If Yeshua would have stayed in Galilee where he was at and stayed around Abilene in that area and preached, the people would have gladly accepted him, he wouldn't have met the opposition that he did, and they wouldn't have put him to death. And so in Yahweh's plan, all these things had to work out in order for him to be killed. And so it says here, he brought him to this great exalted mountain, and on it, like a building of a city on the south. Like a building of the city on the south. I'm trying to think of exactly how it says in the King James. But anyway, if you look up the words, it actually means it's a building. It actually means the Hebrew word is building. Okay, it's a building or city, and so it's referring to an actual building, a structure that is actually there on the south side. And he says this is not a city that Yekeskia saw. It wasn't speaking about the city of Jerusalem. Because there would be no need to tell us about seeing the part of a city to the south. But what he saw was one building, a city or a public building that he saw. Okay, and this was strange to him, rightly so, because he had never seen this building before because it didn't exist. Okay, it didn't exist on the Temple Mount, and got to remember too, Jerusalem's been built and destroyed and built and destroyed, and it's layers and layers and layers of different strata that make up the city. And that's why the archaeologists are constantly finding stuff that goes back thousands of years ago and so forth. And so the Temple Mount itself wasn't as Probably wasn't as big and so forth, some of it, as people might think and so forth, but although it was pretty nice size. But he saw this building that was there, and so it didn't exist there. There was no room for that building. Okay, it wouldn't have existed at that time because it wasn't built. And so that's what makes this prophecy so amazing. And the fact is that it was a prophecy about the time that we're living in now. And the only time that the building, other than the first and the second temple, that's ever stood on the Temple Mount, is this building that exists right now. And the building that he saw, of course, was the Muslim mosque, which is sitting south of where the temple of Yahweh once stood. And this is all he could see, and that's exactly what he saw. And so what makes this prophecy even more amazing is the fact that it offers a peaceful solution to rebuilding the temple. And that's why, if you remember, the House of Yahweh came out with the brochures about rebuilding the temple. This was one of the first ones here. Peaceful solution to building the temple. And then later, where's the other one at? Then later, remember, it came out looking like this, as this was inserted in there. So you can see it's pretty decent sized structure there, as it exists. So I mean, the mosque is a pretty decent sized building. That's called the Dome of the Rock because it's got that big huge rock in the center of it, and that's where Muhammad went. Remember, he ascended up to heaven. When he did, the mountain wanted to go up with him, so he kind of took his hand and pushed it down and said, "No, you can't go up with me." And then it left the indent on the rock. That's what they say. I guess it's really no different than the Christians when they say he went walking down, when Jesus was walking down the hallway and he put his hand against the wall and made a mark on the wall. But anyway, so that's what they say that the indention is on that big rock that's in there. But that's a big holy site in their eyes. But it shows the foolishness of man too at the same time. So this peaceful solution, okay, is a peaceful solution to rebuilding the temple. And Yahweh's prophecy shows us, one, that the outer court is not rebuilt when the temple was rebuilt, and two, that the Muslim mosque is to remain in the same location with the dividing wall that separates it from the rebuilt temple. And there's a viable plan that this could be done and peace could be kept and they wouldn't have to worry about it. Because, the Christians teach that the mosque has to be torn down because that's where the temple's at. But that's not so. That's not what the prophecies talk about. In fact, in Yahweh 40, verse 5, it says, "And behold, there was an adjoining separation wall dividing the structure around a temple." Okay, so it actually talks about the separation wall, or this dividing wall that was built there, or going to be built. And the measurements that Yahweh gives us shows that this was dividing wall. It doesn't serve a military purpose. It's just simply a division that's there to separate. And it only serves as a privacy fence. Now, these measurements here have never been seen before, never been used in this manner either, in which Yahweh gave them, because never before in history has the temple ever been built without the outer court. Okay, you have the outer court. You had the court of the women, you had the court of the Gentiles, then you had the inner court where the priest went, and then the holy and the most holy place. But these outer courts, was necessary because the people had to come to the priest to bring their sacrifices, and then of course the women had to come up to the gates and bring their sacrifices and stuff too. So, but none of this area is going to be built on the outer court there. And Yahweh is showing us that we don't need to harm the Arabs, and they don't need to be fighting over this temple mount. But Yahweh is showing us that they can, build the temple in the vacant land where the temple stood, with this dividing wall that separates the Arab worshipers from the Jewish worshipers, and they can coexist together in one state as they're talking about. So, it can be done. And there can be salvation for Israel when Yahweh opens up their minds of them and yada, and they're going to see that, it's this superpower that they're forsaken is going to be the only means of them salvation when the time comes. And they're going to see that they have to obey these laws. And they're going to see that they haven't been obeying these laws at all. Let's see, this temple brochure. Y'all recognize that handsome guy? Huh? Y'all see that? Yeah. That's how Pastor looked when I came to the house. Okay, let's see. Some of the stuff that's in here. Ooh. One thing I want to show you was this is the original. Was the sketching? You know, it was sketched in there in a picture, and then later on, of course, they came up with the picture where it was actually like inserted in there. These pictures are very dark though, but you got to remember this stuff was done long ago, and it's very hard to get these pictures looking right because of the old things that was used. What I was going to show you too, though, is the fact that now, let's see, I think we'll get into it on the next page. Yeah, let me get into it on the next page here. Okay, let's go on here. Now he says, the troubles which were centered around the Middle East currently involve all nations. And any day now, these troubles could flare up without containment, risking national security everywhere. And we're not merely facing the possibility of war from the nations which surround them, but we see, we're facing the reality that all the world's major powers really are going to be involved in this as well. And it's also very, every living being on earth is facing nuclear destruction, and the results of what's going to take place. And just like, man was made, was created and placed in that area, and that's where the end times are focused on as well, in that same area there. Babylon rose and Babylon will fall too. So we need Yahweh on our side, of course, and the way that we have to have Yahweh on our side is to turn towards His laws. Proverbs 16, verse 6 and 7 says, "By mercy and truth iniquity is purged, and by reverence for Yahweh men depart from evil." So iniquity is purged when we do the things that Yahweh says to do. And this is why it's so important to keep His laws, because His laws show mercy and truth. You remember Yeshua said, go and learn, like I always told the prophets and stuff too, go and learn what mercy is. I would have mercy rather than sacrifice. Because remember, when the children of Israel left Egypt, they weren't told to sacrifice animals. This was something that was added on later, the animal sacrifices. But when, like Jeremiah says, when they left Egypt, they weren't commanded to offer sacrifices. That was something that was later on given unto them to keep their minds focused on the coming of the Messiah and how they needed Yahweh. So mercy is very, very important, and of course truth is Yahweh's law. And by keeping these things, this is the way that you will keep all of Yahweh's laws, and iniquity will be purged, it will be gotten rid of. And of course, by reverence of Yahweh, men depart from evil. Now when a man's ways please Yahweh, he makes even his enemies at peace with him. And that's exactly what you saw in the time of Solomon, that all of Israel and all the nations, surrounding nations around them, this was a result of showing you that there can be peace if the laws of Yahweh are kept. And that's the only recorded time in man's history that there's been peace on earth in all areas like that. And that was an example that Yahweh was showing. Of course, He was showing us what it's going to be like in the kingdom. Now, in the Limmuwdyah 1 verse 15, He says, "Behold, upon the mountains, the feet of him who brings glad tidings." Okay? The mountains, of course, house of Yahweh is the mountain, and the feet, of course, are the teachings that brings the glad tidings. So this is the Peaceful Solution Character Education. And they publish peace, okay? The publishing of the peace, the glad tidings, the message that the house of Yahweh brings forth. And that's, of course, is the feet. Remember, the students sit at the feet of the teacher, right? And the teacher walks and brings forth this information to the world. to Yada, to those who praise Yahweh, and keep their appointed feasts, and perform your vows. And then the wicked will no longer invade you, and he will utterly be cut off. Okay, so Yahweh's saying, if you keep my laws, if you follow these things, then the promise of protection is there. Because remember, Yahweh says, I will fight your battles. You don't have to worry about these things. Yahweh will take care of everything. We don't have to worry and fear about the enemy, because Yahweh will take care of protecting his house. Now, if we fail to do this simple task, then we can only expect what the prophet Zechariah said as well. In Zechariah 7, verse 12 and 13, yes, they have made their hearts like a hard adamant stone. Okay, remember the heart of stone. You can't pierce. Yahweh can't write his laws in a heart that is stone, because it resists. Okay, but in the hearts of flesh, he says he can write it. So they make it like an adamant stone, in order not to hear the law and the words which Yahweh of hosts has sent by his Spirit through the former prophets. See that? The former prophets. That's why Yeshua said you got to believe all that the prophets have spoken. Therefore, great judgment has come from Yahweh of hosts. You see how they like to make it look like Yahweh is this mean old wrathful God. It's going to come against you. But just as I called, he says, they would not hear. But you see, you can see how that whenever, that's what gives it away in the King James. Even though they put wrath in there, every time you see that, when you see how Yahweh is vengeful and wrathful and the great wrath of Yahweh, if you notice in the verses, it actually shows you why this quote-unquote wrath, of the judgment is coming upon the people, because it actually describes and shows you it's the result of what they have done to themselves. And that's the reason why it's coming. It's simply that Yahweh is simply allowing these things to come upon them, because he's not going to stop it. He's going to let man see, what the ultimate result of their ways is. Well, just as I have called and they would not hear, so they called and I would not hear, says Yahweh of hosts. Because remember, the scripture says the time is coming when, seek Yahweh while he may be found, because the time is coming when he's not going to be listening, because it will be too late. So, he says, I said earlier that the measurements given in Yisrayl have never been used in the temple previously. And he says, I don't believe we should insult an inspired prophet of Yahweh. Many of these prophecies have already been fulfilled in detail. And by saying that Yisrayl made a mistake, like some of these commentaries say, well, the prophet, he probably forgot what he was doing, and, he had so much measurement that he was doing and stuff, he probably forgot what he was using, and nobody can figure it out. Well, this is why no one was ever able to figure this out before, because it wasn't meant for them to have the understanding. And they never really realized what is written in here in the prophets. But remember, everything that is written for these last days. It's written for us in these last days. So he goes on, he says, we should realize that the measurements were not used before because they were written for our generation, and that we should use them now in our generation. In the past few years, Pastor said, I visited Israel several times to work on those measurements. And working with me on the project were 3 experts in the fields of engineering and construction who have also visited Israel for the same purpose. And these men have spent hundreds of hours working to draft the exact pattern of the next temple according to the exact measurements of the temple prophesied by Yisrayl. And the house of Yahweh is now ready to go to work full time, not do the physical work, not that we're all going to take off from here and from Babylon and going to go off and visit, and go stay in Israel, but we're ready to offer them and to show them how to build this temple. We've got the plans. We can easily just hand it over to them when the time is right. And it says in the following pages, you see the results of our work of this vital project. Okay, Yahweh himself gave us these measurements, and he inspired these measurements to be written on paper for all the world to see. I don't have that picture of, that one picture, I think we used to have it hanging in the sanctuary, where passes on the Temple Mount, and he's holding up the plans of the temple. Y'all remember that? And he's got Israeli guards around him, and they're helping him hold up the temple, the blueprints. It's a pretty neat picture. So he says, I want to show you these measurements here in this Temple Mount, okay? And you look at the page here. It says this is a diagram of the first and the second temple superimposed on the Temple Mount platform. Now, this, here you see the dome of the rock, okay, and here is the lighted diagram, I think, is the first temple, and this one was the second one, in the darker. But you see how they lay down on one another. Okay, right over here is the dome of that little dot there is the dome of the tablets. Okay, that is, I got a picture of it somewhere. The dome of the tablets is what they say is the foundation stone. There's a little covering over it. I think in here somewhere they had a picture. Oh, I had a picture and I should have brought it. Anyway, it covers, that is where the Ark of the Covenant was at, okay, and that's where they rested the Ark of the Covenant on that particular spot. And they have a little covering. Where is that picture of that thing? They have a little covering over, oh, it's in here. They have a little covering over it, and they know that that's where the Ark had rested at one time. Now, even the Arabs would call it. Now, the Arabs, they will call it the Dome of the Spirits, showing that there's that they knew that there was some form of holiness that was there. But the other name is the Dome of the Tablets, referring to, of course, the 10 tablets that was in the Ark of the Covenant. But when it's interesting because where it's sitting at, it's got a covering, and of course it's been covered. The covering wasn't always there, but I think once they discovered where it was at, you would know. I'm trying to find something I can't find it here. But it's interesting because it plays a vital part because of the fact that it marks a specific location, which they've got to have to know in order to know where those temples overlay. Here's the Temple Mount. That right there is what is the dome of the tablets. Where is that other picture of it? Anyway, it's the foundation stone where the Ark of the Covenant rested. Now, it's important because when they did this and they overlaid these things, it matched exactly in the exact location. Now, when you go on to this next page here, or continue on, you catch this proof. I can't find it. It'll pop up eventually, I guess. When it does, I'll throw it up there. He says in the March-April 1983 issue of the Biblical Archaeology Review, Volume 9, Number 2, Dr. Asher Kaufman, in his article on pages 40 to 58, where the ancient temple of Jerusalem stood, extant foundation stone for the Ark of the Covenant is identified, has proven that the first and second temples are exactly in line with the Golden Gate, the East Gate. Now, you cannot find this because it's no longer in print, naturally. But this is what he's talking about here. This was the ancient. Let me back up a little bit more here. Where the ancient temple of Jerusalem stood, the extant foundation stone of the Ark of the Covenant is identified. Okay, and it shows the mosque and the wall there. Here's the eastern gate right here, and here's the Temple Mount. This is what he's referring to as in this article right here. And he says on the following page is the diagram, which is this diagram right there. And he talks about in the diagram how the first and the second temples are superimposed on the Temple Mount platform. That's found on page 57 of Dr. Kaufman's article. Here is the dome of this right here is where the foundation stone, where he's talking about here, is where this is the foundation stone where the Ark of the Covenant sat, in this exact location right here. And they made this over it. So that's what marks this spot right here. And when you look at this picture, you see that even though you've got the first one and the second one overlaid, it still shows you that the dome of the tablets, I don't know if you can go, anyway, that's as close as I can get, but the dome of the tablets is right there. So it's in the same spot there. So it shows that even though you overlap these things, it works. Now the interesting part is that Dr. Kaufman, okay, he went in and he did all this extensive research and measurements and all this stuff, and he came up and he wrote this article that was in Bar Magazine, Biblical Archaeology Review, okay? And this was published back in, when was it, 1983, okay? And the amazing thing is that when he did all of this, and he came up with his diagrams and all this stuff, and had all of his stuff together, and did all his extensive research, and it also shows where he actually went in and he measured, you know, it shows some of the foundation stones and stuff that he measured, and you could everything lined up just exactly right, so he pinpointed this exact area. Well, when Pastor of them went over, they met with him. And remember, they've already got the plans and stuff of the work that the house of Yahweh did. So everything is laid out, and they've got their blueprints and everything. They've got everything laid out. And when they visited him, they had him, they looked at his material and laid it down. And then Pastor took the measurements and the diagrams and everything that the house of Yahweh had done, laid it on top, an exact match. Okay? So that was, of course, a witness from Yahweh showing the fact that this is laid down exactly the way that the prophet Yekizkiah spoke about. Okay? Now, as I said, this is a pretty big... Now you got to remember, okay, the temple's been built, been destroyed, it was rebuilt and destroyed, and then in Yeshua's time, the temple that stood really had been remodeled and stuff by Herod, because it was a big, a big tax project, a big government project. It was great for tourism and all this kind of stuff. But it was a very big structure. And here's a picture that kind of shows that, to show you how magnificent this was. And it makes you think about the fact that when Yeshua talked, when his disciples, and they went, and you remember they make mention to him and says, look at how gigantic this structure is, look how beautiful all of this is, And he said, don't put your stock in any of this, because not one stone is going to be laid upon, existing upon another. It's all going to come down. You've got areas all around here. Here's the temple, main temple area right here. This is just smoke coming up. But here you've got steps that lead up. You've got steps here. You've got steps here. You got to remember, all of this stuff has been covered. Okay, all this had to be. Parts of these things had to be unearthed, and that's how they could figure out where all this stuff laid. This right here, what you see here, this tanned area, that's the Western Wall that you see today. That's all you see today. Okay, now that wall continues to extend in other different streets of Jerusalem down further, but it's not really as popular as this, because this right here itself is on the Temple Mount area. So that's the only thing that you see existing right now. But you can see the Temple Mount itself was a pretty massive size area, even in the time of Yeshua. So you had these bridges and all sorts of different things where people walked. And so the apostles, they were pretty, impressed by the fact that, here is, you see those little dots right there, that's the size of people, So, you can see it was a pretty big thing, okay? So you can see the reason why the apostles was just so amazed at the fact of this huge temple area that was there. And Yeshua said, you better put your faith in the prophets, because the prophets tell you that all this is going to be wiped out. And it was. It was completely wiped out. So when you see how huge this was, and to think that all of it was completely knocked down, it's truly amazing to see what Yahweh prophesied and what actually came to pass. So he goes on and says in the following page of diagram here, Okay, and it says, found on page 57, Dr. Kaufman's article showing a straight line running from the Golden Gate on the east directly to the Dome of the Tablets. Okay, remember now, the Dome of... What did I do with that picture? I lost it again. Okay, the Dome of the Tablets. Remember what the Dome of the Tablets looks like, right? Okay. The East Gate. The East Gate is... Oh, let me go back to something somewhere. The East... here you go. The East Gate is this gate, okay? They call it the Golden Gate. If you notice, it's sealed, okay? It's sealed up. And also in front of it, you can't really tell right here, but also in front of it, there's also a cemetery. Now, the Arabs did that. There's two theories that they think maybe the reason why they did it. Seal it up because in Yechezkel it talks about the Messiah is supposed to come through that gate. Well, if it's sealed up, guess who can't come? Okay? And then they thought another thing, well, okay, let's build a cemetery there so it would be defiled, so certainly no priest would want to go there and come through the gate, you know? So that would keep Yeshua away, to keep the Messiah away. But anyway, that was kind of like their logic. But when you look at this, okay, at this gate here, all right, and you go forward that way, okay, you're going this way, you see in here, here's the gate, and if you do draw a straight line from here all the way up, you run straight into a perfectly straight line from this gate all the way up to the Dome of the Tablets, or in other words, the foundation stone where the ark actually settled. So that's exactly what the scriptures describe it. So they know that that is the location of where the temple will be built, because the other two temples were built there in the same place. So of course the third temple would be built the same. Now Yechezkel's prophecy talks about, they use the cupid, which is a little bit different, which we'll get into in a moment. But he talks about the straight gate, the Golden Gate here. He says, you'll see a straight line running from the Golden Gate on the east directly to the Dome of the Tablets, which now is northwest of the Dome of the Rock. The Dome of the Tablets, as Dr. Kaufman also has proven, is the foundation stone upon where the Ark of the Covenant rested inside the Holy of Holies. And as Dr. Kaufman was proven in this article, the original temple site is approximately 330 feet, 100 meters, northwest of the Dome of the Rock. The Dome of the Rock is not built on the site of the temple. The Dome of the Rock was built on the south of it. And that's what the Christians can't get in their head, because for some stupid reason, they don't have any idea anyway. They just think, this is the Temple Mount. So on this whole mount is where the temple stood. Well, the temple was located on the Temple Mount, but it doesn't mean the temple stood, the temple took up the entire mount. It didn't. And so we see that the prophet Yechezkel shows us that this building that he saw was to the south of where the temple would be built. Very important to realize that. I need this page now. Okay, I'm going to go on the back side. Let's see. 322. Nope. Where's 321? Oh, okay, that's the picture. 322. Okay, so the next thing we got to understand is the fact that Yahweh has established a pattern on how to build. And the same pattern has always been followed. And you remember he even told Moshe, follow the pattern. And this same pattern has always been followed, whether the tent of the meeting set up by Moshe, the first temple built under Solomon, or the second temple built by Zerubbabel, and of course Herod's refurbishing of the second temple. Now the scriptural dimension have been given to us in these last days through Yechezkel for the rebuilding of Yahweh's third temple, according to the same pattern. Now remember, it's not Yahweh's temple. Yahweh is not going to be worshipped at this place. Okay, he's not worshipped there in Jerusalem now. However, it's called Yahweh's temple because, of course, Yahweh is the creator, and it has to be built because it's on the inspiration of Yahweh that these things will be done. Now, when Yechezkel was given this vision, he saw the temple as it would be set up in these last days, and one of the first things that was confirmed to him is this measurement, okay, that would be used. It's called the long cubit, okay. A cubit is a measuring. And measurement, just like you can take your finger like this, right, and you look at those digits, you know that you got approximately an inch between there, right? Well, they use their hand and so forth, and of course that's, you know, a finger breadth, a hand breadth, you know, the width of the hand. Okay. Well, the cubit was from the tip of the finger to the elbow, which is approximately 18 inches there. Okay. But this long cubit was a little bit longer. It was the length of that plus an extra hand breadth, okay, which made it a little bit longer. And that's what the scholars would all get messed up on, is the fact that Yisrayl temple, that's what separates it and makes it different, is the cubit that it uses is larger. So it makes it a larger structure than the other temples that was built before. And that's what throws them all off. But the fact is that Yisrayl temple was built for these last days. And hey, we're in Texas, so the pattern's going to be bigger. No. Okay. That's a Texas joke. Okay. Yisrayl 40, verse 3 and 5 here. So when he took me there, he says, and behold, a being man-like whose appearance resembled bronze, with a line of flax and a measuring reed in his hand. And he stood in the clearing, and behold, there was an adjoining separation, that dividing structure. Okay, that's that separation wall around the temple. And in the being's hand was a measuring reed, 6 long cubits, about 10.5 feet. Each cubit about 1.5 feet, with a hand breadth, about 3 inches. So he measured the separation width of the structure, 1 reed, or about 10.5 feet, and the height rise 1 reed. So that's going to be a pretty wide structure. Now, you know, they also have found they have found these quarries around that area too, where you can actually see some of the stones cracked and sitting there that they didn't use, and some of them that are dug out where they actually did dig them out. This limestone and stuff. So, archaeologists have found all of these things. Now, in Yisrayl 40, verse 13, he says, and these are the measurements of the altar. In the long cubits, about 1 3/4 feet. The long cubit being a cubit about 1.5 feet with a hand breadth, which is about 3 inches, and the gutter was a cubit deep and a cubit wide, and the border of 1 span, a rim about 9 inches wide, next to the edge of it all around. And this was on the top of the altar. So he gives you a measurement there, and just to show you that this cubit measurement is used in there. Now, in Dr. Kaufman's article, he established the length of the cubit used in the construction of the second temple as that of the median cubit, which is divided into 6 hand breadths, and a measure totaling about 43.7 centimeters, or a length of approximately 17.480 inches. However, the Interpreter's Dictionary of the Bible, volume 4, page 837, on the weights and measures, says this. It says, the measuring reed of Ezekiel's escort in his versions extended to a length of 6 long cubits, each being a cubit and a hand breadth in length, according to Ezekiel 40, verse 5. The word long in the Revised Standard Version is not in the Hebrew, but clearly the text implies that there was a short cubit, the more common one, and that Ezekiel's cubit was this short one plus a hand breadth. The length of this cubit again is specified in Ezekiel 43, verse 13. If we take the common cubit, like the short Egyptian cubit, to consist of 6 palms, measuring the palm of your hand, Ezekiel's cubit would be like the long Egyptian cubit, 7 palms, so that the 6 cubit measuring reed would be 7 ordinary cubits long. And this would be according to the foregoing calculations of 51.829 centimeters or 20.405 inches. Okay. So basically what he's showing you here is the fact that this cubit is a long cubit. It was different than the regular standard ones that they use. So the pattern that's used in building Yisrayl temple would be the same pattern that Yahweh established for his house in the very beginning. Only the length of each cubit would be extended by 1 handbreadth, thereby making the temple a larger structure. Okay? So the one in these last days will be larger than the ones that have been made before. Now, he says, I want to inform you that the laws of the temple have already been the laws of the temple have already been established by Yahweh, and the foundation of this temple has already been laid. It's still intact. Zechariah chapter 4 verse 9 says, the hands of Zerubbabel have laid the foundation of this house. His hands will also finish it. Okay? So the foundation has already been laid. Now, what the prophet said is that there would not be one stone laid upon another. That will not come down, which is exactly what they did. All of the stones that have composed the building of the temple structure itself were destroyed. They were taken down, and not one of them is left at that time. However, the foundation stones are still there. And they simply came and moved dirt and everything else over it and covered all of these things. Covered it up. But it's still there underneath. And he says, yes, the elevations of the land contouring have already been prepared by Yahweh. All that remains is the minimal excavation of the existing courts to reach the foundation, which has already been laid. The foundation is under the existing platform of the Temple Mount, waiting for the construction to begin. And if I'm not mistaken, if you look at the Temple Mount model, if it's still intact, when you look and you see where the Dome of the Rock is, okay, and then you see that dividing wall that comes out, you'll notice that it drops down a lower level to indicate that this would have to be excavated out to get down a certain length, to get down and to reach this foundation that's been laid that Zechariah talked about, that Zerubbabel laid down. And remember, stone is very enduring, so it lasts, especially if it's covered and stuff. It's not going to get destroyed, so it's still there. And that's what the prophets speak about. Now, it says the vestibule, the holy place, and the most holy place are recorded. The altar is measured. The buildings on the west is measured. The priest's kitchens established. The priest's rooms and the singers' chambers are designated, etc. The entrances and the exits of the people are all written, and all that remains to begin is to begin. Okay, it's the only thing that remains. All of this stuff is laid out. When you look at the temple, you know, if you look in Yekeskel, in the book of Yekeskel, okay, you see the layout of the temple. And I think it's on possibly page 40, A and B, something like that. But it shows the temple layout, right? And it shows it there. And you see all the way around, the kitchens are all there, the priest quarters, the singers' quarters, and all of these different places. And so you can see where they went in, and they did all of this, the sacrificing and stuff. You know, when people brought sacrifices, they brought them in. The priest killed the animal, you know, and a certain portion went to the priest, and a certain portion went to the person. And of course, the priest would take it, and like I said, priest kitchens. That's what they did. They went in there, and they had big, huge boiling cauldrons, and they boiled the sacrifices. The scriptures tell you this. They boiled the sacrifices, and if you remember, in the time of Samuel or Eli, when his sons, remember, were corrupted, the priest, and they went in and they said, give us the meat of the sacrifice, and the people said, but it hasn't even been, you know, it hasn't even been separated yet, you know, and they said, give it to us now, we want it now, and they took meat forks and they reached in and they grabbed and they pulled out the best sections and so forth, pieces that wasn't even supposed to go with them, but, you know, they just grabbed whatever they wanted and took and stole from the people. And that's how the priesthood became corrupted at that time too. But you know, because a certain portion went to the priest. I think it was the right shoulder. But anyway, so you have the priest kitchens and stuff where the people would come and they would bring the sacrifices in and they would cook it and then bring it out. And believe it or not, it was even done on the Sabbath day. Isn't that amazing? Cooking on the Sabbath day. So it says here in Yekeskel 43 verse 10, Son of man, show the house to the house of Israel so that they may be ashamed of their iniquities, and let them measure the pattern. Notice. So as long as they become ashamed and they realize that they need to do this, then they will understand the pattern and they will be able to use that pattern. Now this word translated pattern in the King James Version is translated plan. In the New International Version, it's number 8508 in Hebrews, in Hebrew Dictionary of Strong's. And you see it means an measure or consummation or pattern. Consummation there, the definition of consummation in Webster's New World Dictionary, Second College Edition, shows that definition of that word, meaning on the page, top of page 324. It means completion or fulfillment, an end or conclusion, an outcome. Now, the definition of the word pattern from the same dictionary shows the word pattern to mean a model or plan used as a guide in making things. It's set of forms in the shape which material is cut or assembled or is finished article. Let me show you that. Because remember, Yahweh told Moshe, make all things according to the pattern. The word pattern means a model or a plan used as a guide in making things. It's a set of forms to the shape in which materials is cut for assembly into the finished article. Okay? And if you've ever done any carpenter work, you know that you have patterns that you will make. Okay, like if you're going to build the roof, you have to make a pattern. You cut out your first rafter and so forth, and then you use that as a pattern. You can cut out your rest from there. Once you've got the original pattern set, you know that you need more of these, and so you go ahead and use that as a pattern and lay it out. So this pattern is set. So we see that Yekeske's temple will have specific dimensions in fulfillment of this plan that Yahweh's given through this prophecy. Here you see on this page, if you remember, it shows the temple area. It shows the dome of the rock. Here's that separation wall. It's that part of it where you'll come out right here in the separation wall. But if you notice, here's a court and here's a court. But there's no other courts, right? In exact fulfillment of what Yahweh said. Now, this leads us to the most obvious evidence, of course, that's presented in the scriptures that Yekeske was standing on the Temple Mount in our day, because the evidence is that the outer court of the original temple was not rebuilt in its entirety at the time of Yekeske's temple when it's rebuilt. So we see here in these scriptures, and keep in mind now, that Yekeske was being led through the temple complex by this being, okay, who measured and admonished Yekeske to write these things down. Now he says the first place that they stood on the Temple Mount, but the first place that they began measuring was on the south. In Yekeske 40 verse 2 and 5 it says, in the visions of Yahweh he brought me into the land of Israel, and he set me upon the greatly exalted mountain, and on it like a building of a city on the south. So he measured the separation wall, okay, or he measured the separation width to the structure, that is to the dome of the rock, 1 reed, or about 10.5 feet. Okay, so that's what he's talking about here. Here's that dividing structure, and of course this would be south, okay, facing the south. So there on the Temple Mount, on the south, is where Yekeske saw this being. That's where he was standing, and what he saw was the Muslim mosque, called the Dome of the Rock. And the separation width to the structure was 1 reed, about 10.5 feet wide. So it's pretty decent sized wall, and height as well. So after they measured that, then they walked over to the east gate, or the Golden Gate, and that's what we looked at earlier. This area here, which is the Golden Gate. And of course in that picture it looks pretty golden too, doesn't it? Because of the stone and where the sun's shining. You know, it's one of the things that they said, this was so beautiful that the reason why Jerusalem was like a tourist attraction almost is because when people traveled to the feast, they said it was such a beautiful sight, because when they got a certain distance away, as they got closer, and the Temple Mount came into view, and they could see the temple, it was beautiful because all of the limestone that they used like glistened in the sun. You know, as you kind of like see here, as you see, it's got that goldenish color. But they said it had this glow like to it, and they knew that they were getting closer and closer to getting to the temple area to keep the feast of Yahweh. So the closer they got to Jerusalem, the more excited that they would get. Okay, let's see. So there on the Temple Mount, to the south, was this mosque. Now, the Golden Gate. They went to the Golden Gate in Yeshuah 40, verse 17 through 19. It says, "Then he brought me towards the outer court." I think I need that piece of paper. "Then he brought me to the outer court area, and there were many rooms and dwellings, and a pavement being constructed all around the court as well, 30 rooms facing the pavement. Now the pavement next to the inner gates was the same as the length of the gates of the lower pavement. Then he measured the width from the forefront of the lower gate to the outer front of the inner court, at the separation 100 cubits from the east to the north." Now he says, I want to draw your attention to verse 19, to the fact that there are pavements measuring 100 cubits, about 175 feet, in the outer court, which extend only to the east and to the north. Okay? In other words, there's no pavement that extends 100 cubits to the south. The reason being is because the Muslim mosque is standing there. And that's what makes it different from any other time period when the temple was ever built. Now the diagram on the following page, let's see, that's the one I've been showing you. Okay, it shows the separation of the pavement extending to the east to the south. Okay, that's the separation wall here. Okay, so as you, like I said, you see the area here, but there's nothing here and there's nothing here. Okay, because of the fact that it has to be that way. Now, there were pavements extending on the east and the north sides, but there's no pavement on the west and the south. And the buildings where the priests' kitchens would take up the west side, and the city building that Yeshuah saw, the Muslim mosque, is located on the south side. So to corroborate the fact that the Dome of the Rock sits on the south of the Temple Mount, Dr. Kaufman points out in his article that the Mishnah states that the greater part of the outer court of the original temple was on the south. Okay, it states that the greater part of the outer court of the original temple was on the south. And you certainly see that whenever you see views of, here's an area view. You can see that there's a vast amount of space over here compared to over here where you would have where the temple would be located. You've got a lot more space on the south side. Okay, and Dr. Kaufman points that out, and he says that the Mishnah states that the greater part of the outer court of the original temple was to the south. However, in Yeshua's temple, this area on the south only extends 1 reed, or about 10.5 feet. Do you realize what this means? He says this means that the Dome of the Rock was built in what is known as the south outer court area. So this proves what Yeshuah said, because this normally would have all been used. However, according to what Yeshuah said, you've only got 10.5 feet here. Okay? Because there is where the temple sits. So another proof of what the prophet Yeshuah spoke about, showing that he saw in these last days. Because had he been talking about any other time, he wouldn't have said that. He would have described it exactly as it was. But all of these measurements have been checked out by the house of Yahweh, by Pastor, and over and over again. He says we do have the exact measurements of Yeshua's temple, the excavations, the gates, the courts, and the house of Yahweh, with the vestibule, the holy place, the most holy place, all according to the prophecy inspired by Yahweh, and according to its exact scriptural dimensions. Yahweh has given us, the house of Yahweh, these measurements, and they're all ready for your disposal. So he says, let us begin this momentous task now to rebuild the temple of Yahweh for these last days. And if you remember too, according to all of these plans that were gotten up, that the house of Yahweh put together, there was also patent was also given to the house of Yahweh in Israel and also in the U.S. for these temple plans. So it's not something that it's an established fact in the laws of the land as well. Let's see, in page 328 here, it says, "Blow the trumpet in Zion, an urgent plea to leaders of all nations." Remember, blowing the trumpet, blowing the trumpet, blowing the trumpet. That's what we've been seeing here, is all of these things is talking about blowing the trumpet, or sounding that warning. Okay, it's the message, of course. The message, the blowing of the trumpet, is the message that comes forth from the seventh trumpeter, or the seventh Malach. You have just read the plain, simple plan to bring peace, not just for Israel, but to all the world. He says this plan, although written thousands of years ago, is viable for our time. A simple solution for peace. A united peace plan for this generation. Chaga, the same prophet who urged the people to rebuild the temple, was inspired to write for these last days in Chaga 2, verse 6 through 9. For this is what Father Yahweh of hosts says, okay, "Once again in a little while I will shake the heavens and the earth, and the sea and the dry land. And I will shake all the nations, and the most desired thing of all the heathen will come, and I will fill this house with glory, says Yahweh. The silver is mine, the gold is mine, and says Yahweh of hosts. And the glory of the latter house will be greater than the glory of the former, says Yahweh. And in this place I will give peace." And that's exactly what he has done. And the glory of this latter house, or latter means western, the western house of Yahweh, that's been established here in the west, is a place that will bring peace and the peaceful solution. It's the only place where it's found. He says, "I urge each of you to do your part to bring about the fulfillment of this prophecy." Now he's writing here, he's writing to the nations, the leaders of the nations, trying to urge them to get behind this push to build the temple, get the temple rebuilt. And all of this was done in accordance to what Yahweh says in his word. Let's see, he goes on and he shows here, he says, quoting from the Jerusalem Talmud and Yama 110, the highly esteemed late Rabbi Pili, writing the Torah Today column for the Jerusalem Post, dated February 11th, 1989, urged the rebuilding of the temple. In every generation which the temple has been built and the temple was destroyed, it is ours perhaps a generation. I was trying to think if I actually had that article. I don't remember because I got, this is a Time article. It was back in 80, I can't remember, but this is a model that's in Jerusalem of what they have made of the temple itself, how they miniature model. But you see, time for a new temple. And I know it was. This also showed the fact that this is the priestly garments. They've got the priestly garments together. They've got the harps. They've got all of the priestly stuff. They've got everything that they need for the priests to be able to start offering sacrifices there in that temple. They just need the temple to be rebuilt. So the house of Yahweh has done a tremendous amount of work getting all of this together and getting this information together, for this prophecy to come to pass. And of course, Yahweh is going to glorify his house, as he says, the glory of this latter house is going to be great. And you are going to see these prophecies come to pass. What we've seen come to pass proves the fact that Yahweh doesn't lie. And like the scripture says, he who comes to Yahweh must believe that he is, and he is a rewarder of those who diligently seek him, in Hebrews chapter 6. So there's no doubt that these prophecies will come to pass, and that this prophecy here referring to the building of the temple will come to pass. Now this generation could be the one to bring peace, he says, to this planet. He says, and you as a leader can be a historical feature. Notice how clever he does this. He says, this generation can be the one to bring peace to this planet. And you as a leader can be the historical figure who does the will of Yahweh in bringing back the Holy Temple. This could be the biggest peace project ever ventured in the history of mankind, simply because of the magnitude of the war in which all nations now face. Yes, the most likely outcome of the nuclear war which lies ahead is that there will be few survivors, he says. I urge you as a leader to do your part in promoting the rebuilding of the next temple, the temple that Yahweh inspired through Yisrayl, in the peaceful manner which Yahweh has revealed to us to bring peace to Israel and to the world. A tremendous amount of work has been done by Pastor in doing this. And you can definitely see the inspiration of Yahweh, because there's no possible way that anybody else could figure these things out. And I do remember him too saying years ago, when he told the priests that were working on this, he says, don't go and look up stuff in encyclopedias and dictionaries in the Bible. Throw all that stuff away. Don't pay a bit of attention to it. Just get your nose in the book of Yahweh. That's where you're going to find your answer. And sure enough, that's what they did. Because when you look in the encyclopedias, like the stuff that said, they can't figure out, the commentaries can't figure out, the encyclopedias write the articles wrong about the cubit. They don't understand this, they don't understand that, because they don't have that understanding. But with Yahweh's guidance, they came with the exact dimensions of this plan. And they actually even built the model of it, which we have on display now. So it's incredible, because we're going to see this come to pass. This is something that in our lifetime, okay, you're going to see this prophecy come to pass soon, very soon. May Yahweh bless you, man. If you go ahead and stand. Almighty Heavenly Father Yahweh, this is Yisrayl Hawkins. I ask him to come before you, a seed of your last day's witness, Yisrayl Hawkins, and through your son, Yeshua Messiah, the high priest of your great house, Father. We do bless you and we thank you for the great opportunity that we had to rehearse your words, Father, of our beloved pastor and overseer, Yisrayl Hawkins. We ask and pray that you bless him and strengthen him, Father, in health and in peace of mind, and that you will continue to inspire him and bless him in all ways, Father, and that he can continue to teach us with this great wisdom, Father, and that we can follow him into your great and awesome kingdom. We do bless you. We thank you, Father, knowing that the days in which we live are the last days, Father. We know and believe these things. We know that you've called us out of the world in these last days, so that our minds could be open to have a part in this great work. And we ask and pray you help us to take it seriously, Father, and to work towards overcoming all sin and seeing your kingdom come soon, Father. We bless you, we thank you, and we ask that you continue to be with us, give us your peace, give us your healing, and continue to inspire us that we can, each and every moment of the day, so that we can continue to do your work and see your kingdom come soon, Father. For we do ask and pray this in unity with the body of priests, through your servant Israel, and through your beloved Son, Yeshua Messiah, the high priest of your great house. Hallelujah, Yahweh. Praise Yahweh.